the other, I don't really even have.
Those are the ones that actually
it's been a while. Because I believe by now every person should be adapting to that. And but despite the fact that all those aspects are being done, the truth be told, these people get smarter every other day, and they do whatever it takes to make sure that they vandalize the electricity at the end of the day.
But I feel like this is actually going to be a lesson to everyone that will be culpable for these vandals. 1 billion is a lot. We see it in most companies actually, because they're not really, they don't have yaka. Again, so some, I say some, so they find themselves with lots of bills, and the only way out is to vandal and steal electricity. So according to the Electricity Amendment Bill that was last year passed in April, 1 billion shillings fine or 15 years term was set for anyone who's found guilty of vandalizing electricity infrastructure.
Okay, that's quite a key aspect there.
So this was said when actually the State Minister for Energy, Mr. Sidronas, was launching electricity power at Wabitosi Trading Center, Kandwa sub-county in Chivoga district. That was yesterday.
Okay. Well, now, of course, taking a look, today we read something about courses expiring. I'm getting something here. Of course, there's some people, students trying to say, actually, from one of the universities which was mentioned, amongst those universities that have expired courses. And of course, they're appealing to the National Higher Council of Education to update its aspect. So probably they want National Council for Education to wake up and work on their database. And well, probably what they put out there, what they consider to be outdated. Some of the universities actually have updated their curriculums up to, I think the standard is up to 2018, 2019 there. So, well, something, of course, lots of aspects still going on, because majority of the students actually this morning were taking screenshots of that news, of the newspaper, of the New Vision, the Daily Monitor, sending it to the faculty administrators of the different universities, telling them what does this mean. And of course, we are still getting to see how really this will turn out, because it's causing quite some sorts of some turmoil amongst the students in regarding to what they're doing. Imagine you're paying your money and they're telling you that your course is expired. Really, when you come to assess it from this other perspective of attaching value, when you invest money into your degree, you need to see value for money, return of the value. You need to make sure that it's worth it at the end of the day. You have to reap it back. And you hear such an aspect, it's really very, very discouraging.
But anyway, I've had cases because I had friends who did like population studies. It was a course at Macquarie University. Of course, it was phased out. I believe, I think maybe for the first years that are joining in this year, it may concern them. Not the continuing ones. Of course, they have to continue and finish their courses. Population studies, we see construction management was actually phased out. It was added into another course as a course unit. Course unit, yeah. Yeah, they broke, I don't know, there is a point where they broke down this to easen up, enrollment of students in universities, because we used to see students lacking points to enter into by then university. So they had to break them so that everyone at least could access education. Yes. Okay. So, but now the system is changing. They see what used to be a course can actually be is a missing link to a certain huge course. Now take a look at construction management. It's into architecture. Okay. Yeah. So definitely construction and architecture go hand in hand. Go hand in hand.
Okay. Yeah. What else was there that was making rounds over the weekend?
Brookside, Kenya internal policy intrigues are increasingly becoming a new non-tariff barrier to the trade in East African community, potentially harming the success of the common market, with Ugandan milk producers being the latest victims. Now, the Uganda Dairy Development Authority last week, after complaints from some exporters and producers saying that authorities in Kenya were limiting the number of export permits for the powdered milk and issuing others at a slow pace. This is actually...
You see, actually, it's not the first time this aspect is happening, and I can really understand Kenya from that perspective. There is protectionism because you have to protect excess competition. But with what is coming up, last week we discussed about something at the Africa regional market. But of course, before we have we talk about regional markets, we need to stabilize within interregional. Okay, before we stabilize a continental market, we need to stabilize the regional markets from this perspective. Now, when we look still further here, we see that some of the propositions that were being put out there was regarding for countries to ease up borders. But then also, however much, all those aspects should be also looked up to. There is also the aspect of increasing value of what we are putting out there, value addition of what we put out to Kenya there. Because as much as Kenya is concerned, of course, they have equality of the aspect that they do really accept. So that's why it's important as farmers out there, dealers in exports, milk-related exports, of course, looking down to the quality of what is being put there. But however, that's just one of the sides we can look up to it. But then another aspect we can look into here is having a regional product that is being sent out there to other regions. For example, as the East African community, apart from, because one of the key aspects, some of the key tools of the African trade is the aspect of protectionism. They have to look into what there was competition, there is protectionism and intellectual property. Those are aspects which need to be really respected, despite the fact that we are trying to trade amongst ourselves. Though the bigger picture is trading from Africa to outside countries, to other continents. But of course, we need to first grow the trade within, to stabilize the trade within ourselves as African. But of course, still looking at it from the regional perspective, that is perfecting. So what Kenyans are doing, probably, it could be at some sort of an implementation of some of the key factors of the regional trade, and protectionism being one of the key aspects. That is quite very clear. Because in Kenya, there is quite a lot of, the seasons, it's a little rainy, and I find that on such days, there is quite increased output of dairy products, which are being put there. So, meaning that is going to lead to excess milk, surplus of milk provided on the Kenyan market. Now, on top of the surplus of the Kenyan milk, Uganda, you're also importing towards Kenya. So that might be a little bit tricky and hard for you to penetrate there. And it's not a surprise that such aspects are really coming up. It doesn't really surprise me. But the bigger picture in the essence, despite all these aspects we're doing, it could be the fact that if, as East Africa market, we're trying to grow, like I said, if we can have a common commodity that we can put out there that really defines us. West Africa has that. The countries in the north, in the Arab region, that is Egypt, Algeria, having what defines them, looking down at the SADC, having what really defines it, that would be something very ideal. For example, it's like how Uganda, we've opened up markets in Algeria. And I'll tell you the truth, we cannot supply Algeria to the fullest. They'll still need more. Yes, so so if you see, now an advantage of regional trade is like if you have a commodity like milk, if you say that, okay, as East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, let's, because instead of putting barriers, because remember, if you put barriers to my milk, you're going to affect me because I was counting on you. I would call for I would this is my opinion. It would have been better. You get that milk, surplus milk, look for a market which you have secured out there. If it's Uganda that has secured that market, it's not evil for Kenya to be a part of that market. It's not evil for Tanzania to be part of that market, or any other country that is into the East African community. So I believe that would be one of the ways to counteract such aspects. That it ceases to be a place of individual countries, individualism, because that has its own evils, that are economic evils that come in the long run. But if we are to unite, and by the way, this is one of the ways that really speaks of how far a regional market is going to succeed. Because if you look at Europe, how really European countries trade amongst themselves, except of recently when the UK separated from them. But there is quite efficient trade that is happening there. And that explains why the EU zone is one of the strong regional, we cannot neglect it from the regional markets. It starts from the internal relations within the continent, the countries that are within, that you find that something can be secured. If a market is secured for Europe in Africa, all countries in Europe can participate into that market. And when the money comes in, it's distributed. Of course, the distribution will be according to what you contributed at the end of the day. But then, regardless of what you contributed, if you're getting something out of that, it's better, because you're opening yourself up to a big, wide range of the market unimaginable. Because now from there, you'll transcend just be trading within Africa, and then you'll start to trade outside of Africa. And that's what we need. And once that is established, we shall get to see that regional currencies are going to develop. And actually, some of the aspects which were being discussed, I'm still relating it to the Kenya-Uganda, because the common aspect that we use is the shillings. If we have a developed trading, because one of the some of the recommendations is that when we are purchasing in the future, when we have the African regional market, is that we shall be purchasing through local currencies. Definitely. And not dollar or what. Because in this way, we shall be having a bargaining power when it comes to, because once our currencies are strengthened, they will cease to be backed up by gold. Because most of the currencies worldwide, their value is determined by the gold reserves that back them up. But how come the dollar is a different case? Because members in the White House simply sit down and they say, now we are putting the dollar at this rate. And that's what it's going to be. But Africa, there is no way we are going to reach there when we are still using the dollar. So that's why it's important that we adapt that aspect, that we have our regional markets. But anyway, the bigger picture in here, I understand Kenya, it's all about protectionism, but I think we should also dwell onto the bigger picture of uniting the regional markets and having that common product that represents East Africa as a region that we can actually put out there to the market, and it can generate us quite some huge lots of money. What else do we have there? What was happening throughout the weekend? I know quite lots. Maybe before we talk about anything else, there has been an issue of the insecurity that has been going on, and the gun violence going on. And what really this depicts from an environment having such an issue, of course, businesses cease to really stabilize. That's why, if you remember, way back in 1986, when President Yoweri Museveni just took over power, because we had seen insecurities that the previous governments had put into, and that is something which the president really succeeded to really establish. If you look at the business atmosphere within 1986 coming to, of course, there was still, the country was still getting back to stabilize itself better. But if we were to look all the way from the first manifesto, that was in 1996, which was really about peace. It was about peace. It was once one of the aspects President Museveni had put in there. And if you look at the businesses which proceeded within that time, it was really very okay. The currency had a value. But of course, as you know, time's changing, and sometimes this is a global wave. you see, now this all comes back to the economic matters that affect, all the way switching. It's a global wave, but it affects you differently as a country, Uganda. And once it affects you, of course, it's going to cause frustrations. People are going to become psychologically ill. And what else, of course, do you expect? Of course, as time goes on in harder times. And this is something which is not only a responsibility primarily to governments locally. Local governments, not really, as I may not really dwell on it but it should be something that should be a pace that should be set from the top world leaders, seeing how this can be harmonized. Because the biggest issue is about greed, selfishness. I want to control this, I want to control that. Little do you know that all those aspirations are going to come back to some of the poor countries, developing countries, and it's going to initiate gun violence. That's why if they tell you that everything that happens in any country affects you as a person, it is important to notice that. The best aspect that you can do when you see such items happen, as such aspects happen, is to position yourself to get ready. Actually, you should be looking at the outcomes. That's the most important aspect. So just the insecurity bit of it that has been happening there, but well, everything will be okay, I believe, as time really proceeds.
Yes, of course. There's actually there's a lot that was happening. Actually, talking of insecurity, a university student was, shot.
Yeah,
Uganda Christian University for, I don't know. I think, they have been attributing these killings to people having mental issues, and I've seen this actually somewhere about mental health.
Okay.
And it should be actually given a priority.
Mental health.
Mental health. People are facing a lot of challenges.
But you see,
mentally.
it still comes back to the individuals, because even a country where there is liberalization when it comes to gun ownership, the US, there is still so much to do with gun violence. But there are also mental hospitals, and they take it so serious. But every other day, at least you don't go 2 weeks, you hear shootings. Of course, recently I've taken a while without hearing any shootings happening in the country, of the United States probably, but massive of them, and gun violence is always a big issue there. So the aspect of mental issue, it's a global issue. People are just frustrated from economic hardships which are happening in there.
Because now, as I see, officials from the mental health department in Masisi district asked government to consider enhanced mental illness treatment at lower health center 3s and 4s. There is these mental health facilities cost a bit higher. Yeah, because centers.
Because even not only that, if you look at the manpower that you're going to employ them, the psychiatrists are quite expensive, because that is, you're dealing with somebody's, it's one thing to operate a heart, and probably the mechanism of what you started it, but with human psychology is volatile. You just never know what somebody is going to think, what they are going to do. You might think you are implanting something right for them, but they surprise you. So when you put all that together, we can understand what these mental doctors go through when it comes to treating these patients. Sometimes some of them are showing signs of recovery, but before you know it, they get back to that state. So it calls for having a certain power within you that can influence somebody's way of thinking. So that's what they call, which I didn't want to dwell on, but higher dimension, operating on a higher dimension. You can't operate it on just physical. That's why they call them psychiatrist, psychic ability. Psychic deals with telekinetism, being able to read somebody's mind. That's why they tell you they can read your mind. And all that. So it all takes telekinesis, and it's draining, very energy consuming, and that's why such a doctor will really name their price to the maximum. Imagine they have dealt with over 5 patients in a week.
Yeah, it's exhausting to them.
It's very exhausting. Their energy is being drained. Well, it's 10 minutes to the top of the hour, and we've come to the end of Smart Ninja Business this morning. Of course, I've been Andrew Barija with Masi Katsime this morning, driving your business on your daily Kickstarter. Well, don't forget on our channels, that is on channel 372 on DSTV and channel 320 on GOTV. You'll be able to catch us at any part of the region that you will be at, and on our social media handles at Smart24TV on Twitter, and the Smart24TV on Facebook, and Smart24 TV Live. That's on YouTube. You'll be able to get us at any part of the country and the world at large as we bring you the latest into the world of business, and of course both international and local at the same perspective. Well, it's a new week. It's a fresh week. It's very important to be productive. Make sure that the mistakes that you probably did last week, you don't proceed them. You don't repeat them again this week. It's always, it should be done for the better. I know the conditions are quite harsh, but of course that's what builds resiliency amongst you. As when times get better, at the end of the day, you will look back and you say, I have come from somewhere. I have a journey. Well, that is it for this morning. Of course, be productive for the day. Till tomorrow, a very good morning.